Hey, Dog Nation, welcome to Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. My name is Brandon Adams. I have some good news and some bad news. Let me start with the bad news first. Our buddy Jeff Sintel not with us here today. We'll look forward to catching up with him again next week on the program. That, as I said, is indeed the bad news. We're going to have Jeff to bounce off of and get some recruiting information from. But the good news, though, is as you watch this program over the course of the next 60 minutes, it will almost feel as if Jeff Sintel is here, because Jeff was very busy this past Sunday, having a chance to catch up with a lot of the top names in the 2020 and in some cases the 2021 recruiting cycle. You'll be reading a lot of that in the days ahead at DogNation.com, and no doubt seeing some video pop up on the Dog Nation video channels about that. But some of the work that Jeff has already done, along with our buddy Connor Riley and Michael Carvel, our on-site producers here in our Dog Nation World Headquarters studios, some of that work we'll be able to share with you today, and will set us up for a really good conversation. So you may be saying, how am I going to get my recruiting news here today? Well, I think that you'll feel plenty up to date when you watch what we have in store for you over the course of our program. Not all of it, I must say, great news, and y'all know I don't like bad recruiting news when it comes to UGA, but I do like accurate news no matter what it is, and in some cases, you may get a little butterfly in your stomach here and there, depending on kind of what your perspective is on where some of this stuff is going, either with a UGA commit, who we'll hear from later on, Jamil Burrows, a guy that I really like, who, let's face it, had some nice things to say about LSU. Still liking the Dogs, though, but does have some nice things to say about LSU. We'll hear from Burrows on that. Really interesting update with Arik Gilbert that I think you're going to really, really enjoy. And off the top of the program, I want to talk for a bit as well about five-star defensive end Myles Murphy. And we joked about this on Dog Nation Daily already this week, that both Jeff Sintel and Connor Riley were saying that BA's not going to like this. BA's not going to feel too good about what he heard from Myles Murphy. And I will admit, I don't necessarily feel great about where this is going right now. I think that Myles Murphy has a tangible and symbolic value when it comes to Georgia. Obviously, you look at the film, it speaks for itself. You look at the overall specs of this very impressive defensive player, that speaks for itself too. This is a player you want just for the obvious reasons of the fact that he's a really good player. However, in addition to that, one of the things about Murphy is that there is a representation of elite player in the state of Georgia, and is Georgia going to lose another one of those guys to an out-of-state program? In this case, you'll hear Murphy in his own words on this in a moment. It seems like Clemson's real factor. Maybe Auburn is as well, but let's face it, Georgia fans right now aren't that worried about head-to-head recruiting battles when it comes to Auburn. It's Clemson that makes them a bit more nervous right now, and maybe the entire scenario with Murphy makes you nervous too. Let me let you watch the interview that Dog Nation was able to conduct with Murphy the other day. And when we come back from that, here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, I'll talk to you a bit more about where it lands with me and where I think all of this may be going next. Murphy, no matter how you slice it, is a critical piece of somebody's 2020 class. Can it still be Georgia's? Let's see if we can get some clues. Take a look.
Well, for Georgia, I've never been to their academic facility, so that's probably what I'm going to be doing for the next visit, because I've seen all the football pretty much at every school. So I'm just going to have to differentiate each school by their academic facilities.
How does you went against Tate? I want your thoughts on that matchup. What was it like going against that guy? Good on good, right?
Oh yeah, it was. I was excited, but really nervous at the same time. I can tell he was too, because we were trying to calm each other's nerves down by having some small talk before, and we're both pretty good friends, obviously. So it was just good competition on good competition. He won one. Well, I won one. He won one. Then I won one. So we're very evenly matched.
You've been able to put your finger on, like, this will make your decision, this will be the biggest thing towards your decision that will be sparking your decision. Do you know what those one or two things are?
That's a good question. There's really no one or two things about it. It's the feeling that I have at school is going to be the biggest thing. Then it goes academics, then where I would fit in that scheme of their defense.
If you had to pick out two hats that are going to be on your final table, right, come decision time, who are two hats that you're at this point you're real confident will be there in the end for you? Not that you're going to pick them, but
two hats that I know will be there.
Right.
It'll be probably Auburn, Clemson, but those aren't the only. Those are the only two that I know that are going to be up there.
What recruit is doing the best job or the most persistent job trying to get you to come to his school?
They all are. they're all hitting my phone every day as much as possible, trying to make conversation with me. And I'll tell them if I want to talk to you, I'll call you. But I call all of them pretty easily though.
Are you in any of the group texts
Oh yeah.
for the commit list?
Yeah.
Myles, I apologize if you've already said this. You mentioned top 5 and top 10 earlier. Do you have any dates or framework about when you want to do that? Summerish? Any idea like that?
There's no dates, but I will try my best to come out with top 5 or top 10 in the summer. But there's no promise of what specific day I'll come out with it.
Still want to announce like Tank did about that timing right before your senior year?
Yeah, probably early, yeah.
Which school hits the buttons for your degree pursuit? Which one's the best degree fit for you right now, academic-wise?
What was it? Clemson at first was a military school, so they're pretty big on structural engineering. So is Auburn. So Auburn is actually really good on engineering in all facilities. They're the biggest at mechanical engineering. And then Tennessee, they're also really good on engineering. I toured their engineering facility actually a few months ago. It was nice.
Maybe what does Georgia have to do to keep pace with all those other schools? It sounds like Auburn and Clemson are connecting the dots for you. You made that hat answer a second ago. What does Georgia need to do to keep pace with those guys?
Oh, well, they are keeping pace. It's on me when it comes to that. So I just have to keep looking for what I want to see, and if I don't see it, I just have to cross it off the list.
So I want to give you a chance to react to what you just saw there from Myles Murphy. A lot of folks on our Dog Nation Facebook page and YouTube page are already doing that. I'll kind of weigh in on my stuff on this as well. And I guess the most positive spin on this is what Murphy says at the end of, oh, Georgia is keeping pace, but boy, y'all, come on now. It's a bit jarring to have this young man in Powder Springs, just really down the road from the UGA campus, saying the 2 hats that I know are going to be on my table for my commit, and this is all, proverbially speaking, but the 2 hats that I know are going to be on my table, Clemson and Auburn, those are the 2 that I know for sure. And you're leaning in and waiting for Georgia, and it doesn't come there. At the end, though, he does have some nice things to say about the Dogs. I'd be curious to know what you think about this. Crow King 123 in our YouTube comment section here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger says, hey, when it comes to Murphy, we could use some true ends. He's capable of coming in and competing. What he means is a true defensive end as opposed to someone that might be more of an outside linebacker. And in terms of the procedural part of this, when it comes to recruiting, that kind of stuff is always really interesting to me. The process behind just the major headline or the major bullet points of the story, how Murphy's going to be used. And is he the glamour position, the guy that's getting the quarterback, or more of the classic defensive end, the guy playing there along the defensive line? That would seem to be really important to Murphy based on what he says right there. I would also invite you to check out the written piece from Jeff Sintel, which accompanies that video. It's up on dognation.com right now, and Jeff has some more thoughts on that a bit too. That would seem to be a crucial part of this discussion. In fact, I've had some UGA fans reach out to me on Twitter at DogNation Daily over the last couple of days, and that's the one thing that they have expressed some concern about is I think some of these other schools may be telling Murphy a bit more of what he wants to hear in terms of his position fit and how he wants to be used, and clearly there's, I guess, a little bit of concern about that when it comes to a lot of Georgia fans right now. But no doubt about it, Murphy, I believe, is an important piece here for Georgia and one of those really, I think, crucial measuring sticks to compare how Georgia is doing as a recruiting juggernaut right now compared to the likes of Clemson, the reigning national champion. I'd love to see Georgia and Clemson play on the field at some point in time. If they're going to go head-to-head this much when it comes to recruiting, you need to have those head-to-head battles so maybe the Dogs can take down Clemson a notch or two before it's all said and done. Kid also says, LOL, B.A. Murphy's not looking to come in and compete with so much talent. When I look at this young man, I don't necessarily see a guy that's afraid of competition. And if Murphy were to choose another school besides Georgia, I'm not sure that'd be the reason why. Although for all these young men, this is a business decision. And obviously Murphy's going to be aware of the presence of other guys on the Georgia roster who can get to the quarterback and potentially be dominant players the way that he wants to be. I don't think that's an unfair thing to necessarily say that he's going to be aware of that. But at the same time, I don't think that Kirby Smart and this Georgia coaching staff would be going after him if they thought he was truly afraid of competitions. I think they see a competitor. And listen, I think a lot of Georgia fans hope he's still competing for Georgia before it's all said and done. Charles Kaiser also brings up Brian Brzee in this conversation because That's the other part about this when it comes to Myles Murphy, is how it factors also into that Brian Brzee conversation. Brzee, who we'll mention in a moment, as part of our top targets list that we cover for you every week here on Before the Hedges. I think one of the things a lot of Georgia fans don't like is the fact that you hear that chatter about Brzee and Murphy, and Clemson comes up with both these guys right now. I think that's the kind of thing that a lot of Georgia fans just don't really love about all this right now, and there is a little bit of anxiety. One more point on Murphy before we see our top targets list and update that again once again this week on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. I don't know if all of you watching this got the same conclusion that I did, but it's pretty clear that Murphy's not giving you a ton, and I think that makes him even more interesting as a recruit, the fact that he really holds back, not talking about which recruits he've even impacted the most or which other coaches have impacted him the most. He's not really giving you a ton on that. So there's clearly something that he's thinking that he may not necessarily want people to know, or a process that he's going through that he wants to keep private. Oftentimes I think you find that guys who are that guarded with their own information are really good at getting information from others, which makes me think that when Murphy sits down with a Georgia coaching staff or a Clemson coaching staff or a coaching staff like that, he must have very pointed, serious questions. He seems to have a very business-like approach with how he's going through his recruitment. I can only imagine how intriguing those private, closed-door conversations must be as Murphy talks about all of this and then chooses to keep that a secret. We try to pry it away from him. All right, it's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. You see me, I'm Brandon Adams. There is no Jeff Sintel here this week. We'll look forward to having Jeff back on our program again next week. Of course, Kroger makes it possible for you each and every week, and we're certainly glad of that. And I want to make you aware of a very special offer from our friends at Kroger right now. Starting today, you can download coupons at Kroger.com or the Kroger app. And these coupons are available to be downloaded between now and this Saturday, and you can, or I should say Saturday, March 30th, and you can redeem those in store Friday and Saturday to have some really nice things. This is March 27th through March 30th. So you can redeem those coupons and then get in there and do that on Friday and Saturday. Really good deals on Minute Maid orange juice and bacon. That is all for you at your local Kroger. So check out the Kroger app and Kroger.com. You can have a lot more on that. All right, we got a lot more of your comments coming in there as well. We'll give you a chance to react on a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here on the program today. Look forward to hearing from you on that. We'll also look forward to hearing from another couple of really impressive recruits for this 2020 class. One already a UGA commit, one a lot of Georgia fans hope one day becomes a UGA commit. We'll hear from Jamil Burrows and Arik Gilbert on the program today, coming up in just a moment. Before we get to that, though, here on the program, we like to update this for you every single week. It's a look at the top targets for Georgia for its 2020 class, kind of a reset of the board, and in some cases providing a bit of the latest news. And at the top of the list here on our top targets list, name number one, name number two. Let me do both of these together because they both just came up a moment ago. Right now, there is no denying that five-star defensive end Brian Brzee from Damascus, Maryland, is definitely thought to be trending towards Clemson. I joked with Jeff Sintel about something that he recently said on Dog Nation Daily, that as it stands right now, that Georgia fans may be more, instead of rooting for a commitment from Brzee to UGA, it almost seems right now that UGA fans are left rooting against a commitment from Brzee towards Clemson. There seems to be some movement there, but obviously there is still plenty of time for some work here. And of course, Georgia's going to do its work with Brzee on campus, and certainly we'll hear more about that, I'm sure, in the months ahead. And just behind him is Myles Murphy, and I do think it would be a big loss for Georgia, as well as Georgia's recruited. And I hate to turn this into the ifs, ands, and buts of negative talk here, but if Georgia were to lose out on both Brzee and Murphy, I do think there'd be a little bit of a red X put on Georgia's 2020 class. Those would be noticeable misses, and I think that would put a little extra pressure on Trey Scott, the defensive line coach, as he tries to keep pace with the other Georgia assistants in terms of the overall collection of elite talent being amassed on this roster right now. Let me move on to item number 3 on this list, Arik Gilbert. You're going to get a chance to hear from Gilbert coming up in just a moment. And when you hear from Gilbert in the interview on Before the Hedges here today, one of the things I hope you'll pay close attention to is some of the video from Gilbert working out this past Sunday as a part of the Atlanta opening regional qualifier, where a lot of these guys are trying to punch their ticket to the big recruiting event of the summer, the opening itself, which now takes place in Frisco, Texas. I want you to watch the way in which Gilbert stands as a huge contrast to the other guys that he's going through drills with. On this side of the country, there just aren't very many tight end prospects like that look the way that Gilbert does. And if you hear us say these names a lot, but don't often get to see these guys in action, don't live near Marietta High School, don't see them play on autumn Friday nights, when you see this video of Gilbert for yourself in a moment, I think you'll see what some of the fuss is about when it comes to this five-star tight end, a guy that could be catching some big-time passes in a Georgia uniform, and a guy that's apparently of the belief that Georgia may throw the ball a bit more this upcoming season to that tight end spot, maybe showcasing some of that with Charlie Warner and others, saying, Arik Gilbert, you could be in this and be getting some of these touches for yourself next year. Name number 4 on our top 2020 targets list is a running back. It's Kendall Milton, the very impressive 5-star from out in California. I thought it was kind of funny and a great effort by 4-star UGA wide receiver commit Justin Robinson, who this week kind of gave his shout out to Kendall Milton. And you love seeing Georgia commits trying to recruit other commits. I would invite you to check out the piece that Jeff has recently written at DogNation.com that also talks more about Milton, talking to the Milton camp and getting that assurance from Milton's dad that yes, a visit is upcoming for Georgia, a chance to have that opportunity to impress once again. I think it's crucial that's an unofficial visit. Sounds like it will be. I think that's great news, and I think that Georgia's going to have a real strong chance to impress with Kendall Milton. The other thing that I think the Georgia fans ought to like right now about the Milton recruitment is the fact that it doesn't seem to be any issue whatsoever, and you can read this for yourself at DogNation.com, doesn't seem to be any issue whatsoever for Milton being so far from home. A lot of Georgia fans are concerned. You saw the Dogs get burned with the 2019 class and that running back with John Emery Jr., who finally decided, you know what, let me stay at home in Louisiana and go to LSU and not go all the way to Georgia. Doesn't seem like, whether it be Georgia or another school far from California, doesn't seem like travel and a long distance from home base. Doesn't seem like right now that's going to be much of an issue for Kendall Milton. Also on this list is another running back at number 5, Marshawn Lloyd. The latest on Lloyd, I saw where just within the last couple of weeks, Tennessee has offered Lloyd as of late. I guess better late than never when it comes to getting involved with that. I know that Lloyd this past weekend also took a visit to Penn State. So we're kind of in that visit season where a lot of these guys will be taking their visits and will be, in some cases, official visits, other cases, the unofficial variety. And obviously for a lot of Georgia fans, this is all pointing towards April 20th and G-Day. And how many of these elite prospects, especially at the running back position, can Georgia get on campus? I am of a strong belief that Georgia needs 2 elite, top-level, 5-star running backs for 2020 class, and I'd love for those to be Milton and Lloyd. I know, other mileage may vary. Other names come up as more popular with some UGA fans, but I've always been impressed with Milton. I've grown to be impressed with Lloyd, and I think those are 2 really interesting names to think about. Item number 6, to kind of stay in that D.C. area, is Mikael Sherman, the impressive linebacker from Washington, D.C., and I think one of the interesting things you see with Sherman right now is not just the recent piece of DogNation.com, which speaks of Sherman's interest in Georgia. I think you also see kind of a parallel story to that where other programs that thought they had a real strong chance at Sherman all of a sudden don't quite feel quite as good about that. I was reading an Ohio State recruiting blog recently that kind of stepped back on, at one point in time, was thought that Ohio State, I think a lot of Ohio State fans for sure, felt like they had a real inside track on Sherman, and I don't know that, in fact, I'm gathering they don't feel nearly as confident anymore. So the rise of the relationship with Sherman and Georgia, you got to counterbalance that with another school not quite feeling as good anymore, and certainly in the case of Ohio State, they're not quite feeling as good as they once did when it comes to Mikael Sherman, at least according to what some Buckeyes fans have recently had to say about that. Let me mention a couple names here, also kind of a long way away from Georgia, but names worth considering for Georgia's 2020 class. Number 7 is Darnell Washington on our top targets list, another tight end prospect who's very much like the West Coast version of Arik Gilbert. And one of the things I want you to pay close attention to is that for a Washington, the next name I'm going to mention on the list in just a moment, when they include their list of finalists, you do hear a school like UCLA show up in there, and it's important to remember that a lot of times recruiting is not so much about who you select, but who you're able to eliminate. We saw the Bruins just get manhandled on the recruiting trail for the class of 2019, really kind of the laughing stock of the West Coast. So keep that in mind when you see that name show up as a competitor for Darnell Washington and the receiver we're about to mention in a moment, that I'm not sure right now Chip Kelly's Bruins are a real threat to anybody when it comes to recruiting. But when you watch the film of Washington, you see why he is as really impressive in many regards as Reed Gilbert is, and why a lot of Georgia folks have set their sights on getting both these guys for that class. You know, Georgia's a program that's had some debate about how it uses its tight ends in the past, but when you've got athletic specimens like Washington, where Georgia will be able to get him, the same thing for Gilbert. Those are tight ends that you're certainly going to use. And speaking of receivers, a name that I mentioned a moment ago, Jermaine Burton. I would invite you to take a look at another video we did yesterday on DogNation.com, where Terrence Edwards, the great former Georgia wide receiver and current wide receivers coach, a guy that does a lot of great work on that front, he actually talked in great detail about why he thinks, and he's been adamant about this the entire time, why he thinks Burton is still a major league target for Georgia or for anybody else. When you're setting up your own pecking order of potential receivers for Georgia in the 2020 class, listen closely to Terrence talk about Jermaine Burton. You'll understand why he ranks so high on the major national recruiting list and in the eyes of a lot of Georgia fans too. Keeping it with receivers just for a moment, Rakeem Jarrett is on here as well. Number 9 on our list of top targets for Georgia in 2020. Jarrett shows up as a top target for other programs as well. A lot of online chatter as of late about what his relationship with Tennessee might be like. He's also generated a lot of online chatter because it certainly sounds like he's getting close to want to make his college decision. At least he's flirting with it. Whether he's really going to pull the trigger on that, we'll find out later on. But Georgia's looking to load up and stock up big. Cortez Hankton, the wide receivers coach with the 2020 class. Jarrett and Burton are no doubt names to know there. And then finally, the 10th name on our top targets for 2020 list, one of the rare in-state names for Georgia here, and that's Zykevious Walker. And I hope I get this county right because I've mispronounced this before. Sly County. From Sly County, Zykevious Walker. Walker put out a great social media video this week of a pretty impressive weight room performance. So clearly this is a young man that's getting in great shape and making a big name for himself. And a lot of Georgia fans love to see the Dogs target those in-state prospects. Walker is one of those top Georgia prospects for the class of 2020 that the Dogs seem to have zeroed in on. So we'll watch for that relationship to grow between Walker and Georgia here as well. It's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. My name is Brandon Adams. You've heard me talk now for a while. I'm sure you're ready to hear someone else talk for a change, and there's really no better source to hear from than one of the guys that we just mentioned, one of those top targets for Georgia in its 2020 class, and one of the truly unique prospects that Georgia has produced in quite some time. It's the 5-star tight end Reed Gilbert. He has got a lot to think about, a lot of schools chasing him down. One of those is no doubt UGA. Where do things stand as of now? Here's what Reed Gilbert told Dog Nation this past weekend.
What did you height and weight? What were all the numbers for you today?
6'5", 245.
245.
Yes, sir.
And you were a guy, most people, they say take a couple of days off before you come compete at this thing, but you were working hard yesterday, right?
Yes, sir.
Why?
I've been really trying to work this spring just to get my game to another level. Trying to come back next year stronger. So just really that.
So, Arik, this is the time of season where people ask you every 2 months, are you any closer? I think I was the guy that asked you 2 months ago, are you getting close? Are you any closer? Sometimes that changes. What's that answer look like today with your decision and your process?
I'm getting closer and closer. Narrowing schools down now. And probably I'll have a list in my mind after spring.
Do you have visits in mind, any visits in mind over the next few weeks?
Yeah, first week of April, which is my spring break, I'm going to Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and LSU.
What will that trip teach you? What will you learn from that? Will that almost be like an elimination round for you a little bit, or just a discovery round for you a little bit?
Probably more discovery, just because, like, on the West Coast, I haven't really been there a lot. So just seeing what they have to offer out there.
You know, everybody writes about you. Everybody write a lot of stuff about you out of this thing. What's the truest thing guys like me can say about your recruiting right now? Like, if we wanted to be real, we want to keep it 100 with that emoji. What's the truest thing we can write about your decision and your process right now?
As far as, like, recruiting?
Not who it is, but, like, where are you really at? Like, you know, everybody's going to say he's leaning or whatever. What's the truest thing that we can report accurately about your process and where you're at with your decision right now?
Definitely looking at tight end friendly schools. So that's probably the truest thing I can tell you right now.
Do you need to see? Remember we talked about that. You want to see a school like Georgia throw it more, but then you might commit to a school or any school before you see what the Georgia offense looks like this fall. Mm-hmm. How are you going to get your arms around all that?
If this decision comes like way too close towards the beginning of the season, I'll just wait a little bit and then probably wait till like mid-season to commit.
What is this good for you? What does this help you? Why do you like an event like this, the opening?
Definitely coming out here to compete against a higher talent. You know, people that's ranked 2 in the nation, and well, not in the nation, but in our state. So competing against the top players in the state would be good.
How much of your mindset is you want to get committed so you can build guys around you and have a better class around you? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I definitely want to build a class up around me, which is why I'm trying to commit towards the beginning of the season, so I have time.
You know, one thing with Georgia is they're going after 2 5-star tight ends. Another guy's kind of like you, a little taller. You're more a little refined in the passing game and everything else. Is that a good thing? Did you see Georgia maybe opening up the offense anymore? How do you feel about, you know, being one of 2 5-star tight ends potentially in the Georgia class?
I mean, having 2 tight ends really opens the field up, so it would just be, I guess it'd be a good thing.
How are those one-handed catches coming along right now? How does a dude how to learn how to? You're already super athletic. You're joking with that tweet, right? Or are you just now learning how to do one-handed catches?
No, I'm not just now learning, but
You're working on it.
yeah, I'm working on it. So it's just coming to second nature to me.
When Kirby Smart, when Todd Hartley are in your ear, what are they saying?
Coach Hartley, he really likes me, and I really like him. Obviously, his history, he brings that up a lot with David Njoku, his guys in Miami. So, yeah, that's basically what we talk about.
What's the relationship like now with you and Coach Hartley? Have you been able to build any sort of relationship yet?
Yeah, we talk a lot now. I went down there for a visit, and we got to talk, so that was good. We just talked about how he was trying to change Georgia's offense around with the tight ends. Or not change it around, but just add tight ends into it.
How different is he compared to the other guys at Georgia that have recruited you at tight end? What's his style compared to the other guys? Do you like it? How is it different?
He definitely seems like more of a family guy. He's just like really nice. I haven't seen like him obviously like in the game, so I don't know how he runs the tight ends, but.
When's the next trip you've got to like a school like Georgia? Have you thought about G-Day yet? Is that a spot you're going to make? Is that a stop you're going to make? Or when's the next time you might go to Georgia?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to G-Day for sure. So that'll probably be the next time.
You going to catch a practice too, I guess? Or are you thinking about going to check out a practice as well?
I'm thinking about it. I don't know if I will yet, though. If I have time.
I want to ask you this, a little off the grain here. 7-on-7. Some guys say it's like football on grass. Some say it's off-season activity. How does that help you? How has 7-on-7 football helped your game?
It definitely helps my route running a little bit. It's basically like one-on-ones. And with the quarterbacks we have, it's good to get like passes from them off season, just so I don't lose the touch.
Give me a sense of how much your phone is blown up. Separate it between reporters and coaches. Are the reporters outnumbering the coaches, or the coaches outnumbering the reporters and all the hits on the phone?
Couldn't even tell you, because between my phone number, my Twitter, my mom's phone, it's just all blowing up. But everybody, to be honest.
Which schools recruit your family well, and which schools have been recruiting your family well for a significant amount of time?
Definitely Georgia. Tennessee started to recruit me for a good amount of time, really good. Clemson, Penn State, schools like that.
Last one. I think my experience of talking to guys like you, especially in-state guys with you, there's the comfortable decision, there's the easy decision,
Yes, sir.
and then there's the right decision. Do you feel some of that maybe with Georgia, where sure it'd be easy for you to go to Georgia, but maybe that's not the best for Reed Gilbert? How do you look at something like that, where everybody's like, Georgia prioritizes you, they prioritized you since you were in the 8th grade, a lot of great things about the program. Are there any hesitations at all about Georgia for you at all? You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to pry anything out of you. It's just like Georgia's a school that checks a lot of boxes. It's in-state. You've known it for a while. And some would say, well, the easy decision, the comfortable decision. But sometimes you got to do your own thing.
There's really no hesitation. The reason that I'm just taking my time because I want to make the best decision for me. I don't want to just choose somewhere and then not be happy there. So
you're not the guy that's going to back off a commitment, right? You want to be done with it one time, right?
I want to commit and just stay.
Reed Gilbert, class of 2020 tight end. Thanks for joining us for a few minutes on Dog Nation.
Good stuff there, Jeff Sintel with 5-star tight end Reed Gilbert as a part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. By the way, speaking of Kroger, make sure you score big on savings this month for the big basketball parties that are going on, whether it be Kroger meat and cheese party trays, pork back ribs, or bone-in chicken wings. Great savings on all of that at your local Kroger. Make sure you check that out. And I know you enjoyed checking out Arik Gilbert. I thought there was some really interesting comments coming in the comments section while the Arik Gilbert interview was playing. I agree with something that Drew Roman said. Roman said if he had his choice between Arik Gilbert and Darnell Washington, another elite athletic tight end we talked about earlier, he would take Gilbert. And I think I probably would as well, but it's not for me so much of the fact that I've evaluated Gilbert and just think he's better than Darnell Washington. I guess if you give me the Las Vegas tight end and the Atlanta area tight end, the Las Vegas guy would have to be way better than the Georgia guy. If it's only a choice between one or the other, the Las Vegas guy would have to be way better for me to want to choose him over the Georgia guy, just the way that my mind works on that. However, the other thing that you heard Jeff Sentell talk about with Gilbert there is the possibility that Georgia could get both. Certainly Gilbert didn't seem to be too turned off by the idea of joining Darnell Washington in that class with Georgia. He acknowledges the value of those two tight end sets. I also don't know how familiar he necessarily is with Washington's game, given the fact they play so far apart and live so far apart. But certainly, just based on those words you just heard from Arik Gilbert, he's not afraid of competition on that. Something else that was remarked upon about what you just heard from Arik Gilbert a moment ago is James Bryant in our Facebook comment section talking about how mature that Arik Gilbert comes across. And I do think that's really true, that he's another one of these guys that when you hear him speak, when you look at him, he does come across as much older, much more advanced than a guy who's about to go into this senior year of high school. It's really hard to imagine that he's that young when you see the way that he looks, when you listen to the polished way that he speaks. It's really impressive skill set that Gilbert seems to have both on and off the field. Obviously, you're thrilled about the fact that he did not hesitate at all to say, yes, I'm planning on being at G-Day. It sets up for April 20th for Dog fans to be a really, really intriguing day. Not just for what you're going to see on the actual field with the 2019 Dogs competing against each other and showcasing potential starting spots, but also for a lot of those elite five-star names who could be in the stands that day. That's going to be a lot of fun. Let me make one more point about Gilbert before we get a chance to hear from Jamil Burroughs and the recent trip Burroughs took to LSU and the pull that he may be feeling from Ed Orgeron's program right now. The other point that comes to mind with Gilbert is how much what we heard from Gilbert ties back to something we heard from Myles Murphy off the top of the program. I really kind of find it interesting that the one subject that he seemed the most confident in discussing and sharing his opinion on, much like Murphy, is the way that he's going to be used. Clearly, Murphy, the defensive guy, has a plan for how he wants to be used at the next level, and Gilbert the same way. You may have heard the question from Jeff of, what's the one thing you can tell us for sure about your recruiting right now? And it's not one of those things of, well, I'm definitely not going too far from home, or I'm definitely going to play at an SEC school, or I'm not going to go to any school that wears orange. Nothing like that. It was like, well, I know that I want to be a tight end. There is a clear sense from a lot of these prospects right now of, I don't know where I want to play, but I know how I want to be used. And I think just the way in which the recruiting process has advanced over the last couple of years has increased the awareness these guys have of themselves and how they fit into the larger picture of college football. And they are clearly, many of these guys, certainly I think the example of Murphy off the top of the program, Gilbert right there, I think they are clearly approaching this on a more business-like fashion. I know many of you want to weigh in more on what you heard from Arik Gilbert. We'll give you a chance to do that over the course of our program here today. We will also give away a Kroger $50 How About Them Groceries gift card before we're done. Jeff's not here, but we'll still do that, and I'll look forward to doing that with you myself. And normally we let Jeff do the weekly six-pack trivia. This week there is no Jeff, so I have taken it upon myself to come up with some trivia questions. Now, I'll be feeding those to you. I can't ask Michael and Connor about these because they've already seen the answers because they had to do the graphics. So they can't weigh in and answer these, but you'll have a chance to answer these for yourself. And you can also judge me to see how my trivia questions performed. And there's a specific reason that I chose this week's questions, which we'll also talk about coming up in just a moment. All that's for later, though. For now, another great opportunity to hear from a terrific recruit. Someone already in the fold for Georgia in its 2020 class, but a guy, despite that status, that still has some things to think about, including another SEC program that's recently shown him some favor and some attention, and Burroughs didn't seem to mind it. Let's talk about Burroughs after this, but first let's hear from him. UGA commit Jamil Burroughs, potentially a future anchor for the Dogs' defensive line, but maybe a little bit of LSU interest. Let's hear all of that and find out more about that with Jamil Burroughs right now.
Neil, you went on a Southeast exploration tour. What did you learn checking out other schools, and is it almost like comparing it to where you're at currently? What's that feel? What did you feel like about your data search over the last few months?
Only school I've really been to is LSU lately. So LSU, it was a good visit, but it comes around, the dog's always on top. It's just something about Georgia that I really love, and compared to LSU, Georgia, they more real than LSU.
Would Georgia be the closest contender? I mean, would LSU be the closest contender
sure.
here to Georgia?
Yeah, they're top two, sure.
If there's anybody that could flip you, would it be LSU?
Yeah, most definitely. To be real.
To be real.
Uh-huh.
But it seems like a lot of the core things that made your decision to Georgia, those are still in place, right?
Right,
So,
absolutely.
Who do you want to play with here? I can give you 2 draft choices to join your class. Who do you want to play with?
To join the dogs with me?
Yeah.
Myles Murphy and Andy Boykin.
Those guys.
Let's go. Let's go, baby.
Long time with Boykin,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, long time. Still working.
What do you think makes Myles so special?
He's quick off the ball. He's an athlete, basically. He's an athlete. He can play any position on the defensive side of the ball. I really like how he play. He's hell playing when we go against them. He's always in the backfield when we play them every year. So, it's fun watching him play.
What do you think about Tate Ratledge today? Tate, the big right tackle.
Oh, that's my boy. I wanted to go get some, but they wouldn't let me go at the end because he said I was an inside guy. But
You are an inside guy.
yeah, I guess Tate, he real aggressive. I'm talking about he really fun to watch too. He told me he was going to put on a show today. That's what he did. So that's my boy Tate.
How do you think Tate would fit into the 2020 class at Georgia?
He will fit well. That's somebody I gotta work on too. So, but did you guys see when we first came in? He had nothing but Georgia gear on. I said, "Hold on, Tate. Is that a hint?" He was like, he just started laughing.
What do you like about his game specifically? Just his aggression and the way he gets after it. And he's almost grown. He's grown about an inch over the last year too. I know.
He is getting tall. He got tall. I like his game. Like I said, he's aggressive. He's quick. He got good feet when the ball is snapped, and he's a hard person to get around.
So I got a question about your boy Nazir. I was talking to, I think I was interviewing Myles at the time, and I heard over my ear that he's like a silent commitment, and then he's 1,000% committed to Georgia. What's up with Nazir? Is he still strong in the class, or what?
Yeah, we was just talking up the hill right here. We was like, we still strong. I asked him, he's still strong. He said, we still strong and stuff. Everything going well with him in Georgia. So.
What do you do when a guy says he's not strong? What would you launch into? What would be your move at that point?
To be real, just do it. Do what you think is best for you. You can't really make somebody go a place that they don't feel comfortable at. That's what's so bad. That's what I hate about kids, that they commit to a school that they're not comfortable with because somebody told them they should commit there. So he got to do what's best for him.
Jamil, one or two more for you. Let's talk about Mr. Burrows here. Why is Georgia still the move for you? Is it getting stronger? Is it maintaining? How would you describe the attention or the attraction with you in Georgia?
I don't even know how to say that.
Falling deeper in love, I guess, or what would that mean?
Yeah, I guess so. Every time I'm at Georgia, it's just feel like home. I don't never want to be nowhere else but Georgia. So go Dogs.
Where are you going to be on G-Day?
Where I'm going to be on G-Day? Oh, when is G-Day?
April 20th.
April 20th. I will be at Georgia. Yeah, I'll be at Georgia. April 20th, I'll be at Georgia. Absolutely, Georgia.
Jamil, you're going to visit any other schools, take all your officials. What will that look like for you?
My first official, I'm going to take at LSU, then Georgia, then I'm going to take my third one. I'm going to take a official that I don't really see myself going with, like Ohio State or probably Oregon. I would love to go to Oregon and see what they.
Are those going to go in the spring or the summer or the fall? When are your official visits going to take place?
Spring and fall.
Yeah.
I'm taking LSU this spring, probably like April 5th, something like that. Yeah. So.
Jamil Burrows, got anything to say out there to the fans out there? This is I'm going to drop the mic and let you have it for a second.
I love you guys. Let's go Dogs till I die, and
Thank you, Jamil.
I love the personality from Burrows there. That's a nice way to close the interview out. Dogs till I die. That's good stuff from him there. And I'm always appreciative when a guy like that wants to open up so much about his own recruitment and give you that insight. Listen, I'll be the first to tell you that all of these guys have the right to keep all of this private. I'll never deny that, but it's always a nice touch when they choose not to, and Burrows gives you some pretty good insight there, not only in his own recruitment, but some really interesting and nice complimentary things to say about a guy like Tate Ratledge, some of the other recruits that he's chasing down right now. So I really enjoyed that with Jamil Burrows with Jeff Sintel. And my guess is Jeff Sintel is going to have a lot more with Burrows coming up at DogNation.com, so please make sure you check that out. Let me also get a couple of comments on what Burrows had to say before we move on with our six-pack and our hurry-up, where we try to get as many questions and comments as we can here in just a moment. Zach Smith says, we need this guy, talking about Burrows. Interior defensive lineman. Yeah, there's no doubt that that's a big need for Georgia. Zach also goes on to say running backs, offensive tackles, Brzee and Gilbert. I know I'm beating a dead horse, but that's just it. Those are facts, and I would agree with Zach on that. Those are all well-traveled topics when it comes to UGA recruiting observers, but in this case, it's not wrong either. There's nothing wrong with that point whatsoever. Appreciate the comments on YouTube as well, including Eric M. Rio, who's dipping out of the broadcast. But Eric, we appreciate you being here, and thanks for everything all of you do. Also, Croking 123 on the subject of that interior defensive lineman, Jamil Burrows, mentioned another one of those guys that was just back on campus this past week. That's Warren Brinson, the one-time UGA commit from IMG Academy. Not a real strong, long visit history when it comes to Brinson and UGA, so just the fact that he was back on campus this past weekend in itself is a bit interesting, but Brinson was there, and that'll certainly be something worth watching. Coming up in a moment, we're going to roll through as many comments as you want to do. If you want to do those in recruiting, we'll obviously do that. If you want to kind of veer into a different direction, we'll have a chance to do that just a bit as well, and we'll just kind of go through the entire gamut of everything you want to discuss. Here's part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. And speaking of Kroger, for 4 days only, starting on Thursday, March 28th, heading through Sunday, you can save big on great items at your local Kroger, whether it be Mayfield ice cream, boneless pork loin, Kroger brats, and Italian sausage, a whole lot more. You're getting ready for some of those cookouts, kind of getting that kind of cookout season. There is good stuff for you at your local Kroger on that, so please make sure you check that out starting on Thursday. And we do every week what's known as the Kroger six-pack with trivia questions. Jeff asked them. I try to answer them. I almost never get them right. That's just kind of the way that goes. Some of these questions are almost designed not to get right, if you know what I'm saying, if you kind of sense where I'm coming from. So this week, I have a chance to turn the tables. I have the chance to quiz you on trivia. Instead of Jeff quizzing me, this is my chance to quiz you as a part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Now, I thought I did a pretty good job on these questions. Connor Riley, before the show started, said, they were kind of only okay. I feel like they're pretty good, and there's a specific reason why I'm asking them. If you watched or listened to Dog Nation Daily earlier this week, you heard me talk a bit about Sanford Stadium, the hallowed grounds where Georgia plays. It's football each and every fall Saturday. Well, Sanford Stadium was included in USA Today, their sports blog, kind of, I don't even know what you call it, but they did a bracket of the top venues in all sports. And they had like an NFL region, an NBA, or just a basketball in general region, a baseball region, and a college football region. And Georgia was the 6th seed in the college football region of the USA Today for the Win Stadium bracket. We are in, as the kids like to say, bracket season, and this is USA Today's attempt at all of this. And good news thus far, in what is a totally fictitious tournament, Georgia's actually doing pretty well. As a 6th seed, knocking off Ohio State's horseshoe in round 1, and then a round 2 matchup with, was it the 1 seed or the 2 seed? The 2 seed, the Big House in Michigan. So Georgia laying the Big Ten to waste, knocking off Ohio State in round 1, knocking off Michigan in round 2. I love seeing Georgia fans get involved in this voting. I honestly don't even really know where you go to vote on this, but Georgia's doing well in this bracket thus far. Sanford Stadium is doing well in this bracket thus far. So in honor of Sanford Stadium, which I think sometimes doesn't get as much credit it deserves as a pretty cool venue, the trivia questions today are all, at least in some respect, related to Sanford Stadium. So I'll ask them, I'll give you a chance to answer, and please, everyone play along, and then we'll kind of both see how you do with the answers, and at the very end, you can see how I did in terms of the questions. Does that sound good? All right, let's get rolling here with question number 1. Question number 1 predates Sanford Stadium. The question is, where did UGA play its home games prior to Sanford Stadium? So go ahead and get your answer in on this. And this is the one that Connor said that I didn't do too good of a job on. He says that everybody that goes to UGA hears this, learns about this. They know all about that. So we'll give you 15 seconds to answer, and you can get your answer in. Let me check on the YouTube side of things here for a moment. Philo Beto does weigh in. He thinks he knows the answer. Dapper Dan does as well. Good job to both of you. We'll let the clock run out here. The Facebook side of things, give those folks a chance to answer as well. And the answer, Philo and Dapper did get this one correct. It's Hurdy Field. Hurdy Field was the place that Georgia played its home games prior to Sanford Stadium's construction. I think 1929 was the first year of Sanford Stadium. So prior to that, Georgia played at Hurdy Field. So congratulations to you if you got that question correctly. Now, let's move on to question number 2 on our Sanford Stadium themed trivia as a part of Before the Hedges here today. Let's take a look and see what question number 2 has to offer. All right, where does Sanford Stadium rank among the largest college football venues? Is it the 5th largest, the 10th largest, the 15th largest, or the 20th largest? Once again, 5th, 10th, 15th, or 20th. Get your answer in there, and we shall see. Teresa Stewart checking in. I feel like we haven't seen Teresa in the comment section in a while, but it's good to have Teresa back in here. James Bryant mentions the Polo Grounds, the old home of the New York Giants in baseball. Hunter Tyree weighs in to say it's the 10th largest. Over here on YouTube, Tal Whitaker also says 10th largest. Dapper Dan says 5th largest. Cliff Payne says 10th largest. Mike D says 10th largest. Crow King 1 in 23 says 5th largest. Our 15 seconds are up, right? So a few folks say 5th, a few folks say 10th. The correct answer is 10th largest. The reason why some people are probably saying 5th largest, I have a little bit of insight into this. When Georgia first closed in the bottom portion of the west end zone, 1991, I guess that would have been, when Georgia first closed that section of the west end zone in, Georgia went up to, was it 85,000 at the time? Yeah, they went up to 85,000 at the time, and at that point, they became the 5th largest on-campus stadium. So at that point, Georgia was among the bigger. But there was a huge push for stadium renovations for a long time. A lot of venues went north of 100,000. So Georgia's dipped down a bit, despite the fact they're around a little more than 92,000 right now. 10th largest in the country. So for those of you who got that one correct, good job. And that'll also, I guess we should caveat that's 10th largest on-campus stadium. I don't believe that includes the Rose Bowl in Pasadena where UCLA plays its games. Crow King 123 says, I want half credit for my answer. And Crow King, I'm all about giving partial credit. I told y'all this last week. You know, I like to show my work when I'm answering these in the hopes that maybe I can generate a little partial credit for myself. So I am all about that. Joel Moody also says that we, meaning Georgia and Sanford Stadium, need to expand to 100,000. I wonder if anyone's going to do much more stadium expansion in the future. Georgia, for the most part, I think, has been fairly immune up to now for what is kind of a national problem of most stadiums have a hard time filling the seats that they have. And Georgia, recognizing that, even though, I mean, the best I can tell on a fall Saturday, you see a little pocket up here in the 300 level, maybe a little pocket down there in the lower level of the west end zone, kind of those auxiliary overflow student areas. You see some spots there where they're not always completely full. But for the most part, when I look around the stadium on Saturdays, I still see Sanford Stadium mostly full, but just given the ongoing trend, I wonder if Georgia would be scared away from going to 100,000. At one point in time, you would have thought it's almost a likelihood that it would have, although I don't believe it ever wants to completely enclose that west end zone next to the bridge, because I think the university likes seeing that view of the rolling hills. They like the tradition of the fact that you can still see into part of the stadium from part of the bridge. I think that they want to protect that. I think that there's, probably little appetite to try to find more seats to try to sell, given the fact that, people like watching games on TV now. It's just gotten hard to sell tickets. But it's certainly an interesting thing to mention, the possibility that one day that might happen. Tony Jackson says along the same lines that you're going to have to fight some power, and he uses that in quotation marks, to fully enclose the stadium. Yeah, I've always gotten the impression, even back during the craze of building up attendance as much as you possibly could, that the powers that be didn't favor fully enclosing that in. I think they like the aesthetic look. And for the most part, I think there's something to be said for that. If you've ever been to like Neyland Stadium in Knoxville, when you're in there, it's really weird. And listen, in some ways, that's kind of a cool stadium. The checkerboard's kind of an iconic look. The spot right there on the Tennessee River is kind of well known. But when you're in the stadium, and it used to be that the fact that seated over 100,000 was a really big deal. But when you're in there, you can see, okay, they did this renovation most recently, that renovation a long time ago, this renovation here, that renovation there, and you just kind of see that stuff kind of over and over and over again. You can just sort of see how the whole thing fits together. The aesthetic look from the inside of the stadium is just not particularly great. And so I think that Georgia, for the most part, kind of wants to avoid that. And that's one of the reasons why I think they've always tried to preserve that kind of, whether you want to call it a horseshoe or the open end, whatever you want to call it, Georgia has wanted to preserve that. All right, we may be Hey, sorry about that, y'all. We are back up and running. Had a little technical issue there, but thanks for being a part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. If you're just joining us for the first time because you're seeing this video pop up, you missed the earlier one. On Before the Hedges presented by Kroger each week, we do our weekly six-pack of Kroger trivia questions. And this week, normally it's Jeff that asks the questions. Jeff's not here today. I'm Brandon Adams doing it in place of Jeff. And our trivia questions are Sanford Stadium themed today for reasons I explained a little earlier, and won't go completely all the way through again. But if you're just joining us, play along as we talk about some Sanford Stadium trivia as a part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. We are moving on to question number 3, I believe it is. All right, so this was interesting. I learned this today doing a little research for the first time. What year was the first night game played at Sanford Stadium? Now, after you guess, I'll also tell you another piece of information that I did not know. But your choices are 1940, 1950, 1960, or 1970. What was the year of the first night game in history? Was it 40, 50, 60, or 70? Charles Kaiser says he thinks it's D, the 1970, the first ever night game for Sanford Stadium. Over here on the YouTube side of things, Fonzo says D. Memphis Dog says 1960. Tal Whitaker also says 1960. It was actually way earlier than I would have imagined. The first night game in Sanford Stadium history was apparently played in 1940. Now, those lights that were used for the early night games in Sanford Stadium for really about 40 years were lights that were basically affixed to the ground right next to the playing surface. So if you went to a game at Sanford Stadium back then, and maybe some of you are old enough to remember this, those lights were blocking a lot of the views from the stadium. So if you're in the stadium and those lights are there, they're going to block some of your view. You're not going to be able to see around those. In 1982, though, the lights were reinstalled, and the ones that were basically towers off the ground were taken away, and the lights were then put on the top of the stadium, like you still see in place at Sanford Stadium right now. So Georgia had night game a long time ago, all the way back in 1940. The first night game, if you're curious, was a 7-7 tie between Georgia and Kentucky. So that was the story on that, the first night game, all the way back in 1940. Mike D says it was all those Model Ts around the field with their headlights on. Yeah, I guess it might have been something like that. I was really surprised the first night game was as that seems like a long time ago for night games, right? I don't know how long it was that most Major League Baseball stadiums had the lights put in there, but 1940 seems like kind of a long time ago, but still kind of interesting. Philip Jordan Wells says he's 1 for 2 so far. Tony Jackson says, wow, runway lights? Yeah, I guess it must have been something kind of like that. I think they work kind of like light towers. I almost think about it like some of the stuff you see on the sides of roads now for road work, or some things like that, where you have the kind of almost like temporary towers. I don't know if that's kind of what it looked like or not, but it was not the fancy lights that are on top of the stadium now. It was lights that were blocking the view, which I think is kind of interesting. Philip Jordan Wells, I thought about this in my mind too. He says, was Eddie Gran still the offensive coordinator for Tennessee back in that 7-7 tie? That's pretty funny, Philip. I was kind of thinking the same thing. All right, let's move on to question number 4. And if you're just joining us, I'll explain what we're doing here. These are Sanford Stadium themed trivia questions, as part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. We like to do a little fun trivia stuff near the end of each show. Normally it's Jeff Sintel. Today it's me. Here's our next trivia question. All right. Sanford Stadium's famous hedges were removed in 1996. Why was that? Go ahead and take a moment to weigh in with your answer on that. Why were the Sanford Stadium hedges removed in 1996? They were obviously replaced because you still see the hedges now, but why were they removed? Croaking 123 says, I'm 1 for 1.5 so far. Fonzo weighs in with his answer. Tal Whitaker weighs on his answer, but that's not quite it. Croaking 123 weighs in on his answer there as well. Chris Tatum, Tony Jackson, James Bryant, all very aware of this. It was the 1996 Olympics where Sanford Stadium became the host for Olympic soccer that year. And I don't have a strong memory of this, but my guess is there are a lot of Georgia fans, once they found out they were taking out those hedges, they could not have been that happy about that. You may remember the story from the time. I do remember this part. I don't remember the reaction to hearing they were going to be taken out, but I do remember the so-called secret location the other hedges were being grown in, and they were moved in. And I guess it was a easy process. I didn't hear about any kind of complications with that or anything like that. But the hedges that you see in place now have only been there since after the 96 Olympics, so that's a little bit of a trivial piece of information for you to be aware of. And then finally, question number 6. We are question number 6, right? No, we're not question number 6. This is question number 5. What year was the East End Zone enclosed? Now, we just saw a big West End Zone project this past year, new locker room, new recruiting facility. On the other side of the field, at one point in time, Georgia didn't have any enclosed end zone. It was just 2 grandstands on behind both sidelines. What year was the East End Zone enclosed? You saw your choices there, 51, 61, 71, or 1981. What was your answer to that? By the way, Don Best says those hedges, when they were replaced, were grown in 3 different nurseries, which is an interesting thing to mention. Fonzo weighs in with his answer, Dapper Dan. Tal Whitaker, Mike D weighing in with his answer. Boy, YouTube's been on the ball when it comes to this kind of stuff. Tony Jackson knows here as well. It was 1991, or I should say 1981. 1981 that the East End Zone was enclosed for Sanford Stadium, the year after the national championship. It's one of the reasons why there's a push from some Georgia fans to have Dooley in some way, former UGA coach and athletic director Vince Dooley, in some way commemorated as a part of the stadium, whether it be the field name or something else. Because when you look at a lot of these expansions that have taken place around Sanford Stadium, including the big one in 1981, essentially doubling the seating capacity at the time, Dooley has been chiefly influential in all of that as a coach on the Georgia team that won the national championship, that generated the excitement for the future of the Georgia program, and then as athletic director for a lot of these others, it's really Dooley who gets a lot of credit for the stadium expansion. Chip Towers has talked about that before on Dog Nation Daily. All right, finally, number 6. There was a moment in time, October 7th, 2000, and this is the only time in recorded Sanford Stadium history where this happened. Can you fill in the blank with what happened for the only time in Sanford Stadium history, or at least what's believed to be the only time in Sanford Stadium history, on October 7th, 2000? What was it? Weigh in on that. The YouTube folks have been good before. Let's see if they're good on this. As of yet, not quite as sure about this. I was actually in Sanford Stadium for this moment, remember it very well, and I believe that's the only one of these moments previously from these trivia questions I actually saw with my own eyes. Teresa Stewart weighs in with a guess, but not quite. Chris Branham has his answer, and Chris is correct. That was the only time in recorded Sanford Stadium history that after a Georgia win, fans rushed the field and tore down the goalpost. Now I got to ask our buddy Connor Riley, who is about half my age, as it turns out. Do you have any knowledge or any memory of this whatsoever? So I was there that night. It was against Tennessee. Georgia had not beaten Tennessee in years. It had a long losing streak to Tennessee. This particular team wasn't all that good, but it was a big deal to break a long losing streak to Tennessee. But the weird thing is, and I'm sure this exists on YouTube or somewhere like that, you can go back and see it, the fans started tearing down, first of all, they just leave it to Georgia fans to be a little too rowdy when it comes to a goalpost tearing down. The game wasn't over. Georgia was only up 15, which is a 2-score game. Tennessee had the ball. Y'all can go back and see the details from this yourself. I'm almost 100% sure I'm right about this. Tennessee's got the ball down 2 scores, driving the direction of the goalpost that Georgia was in, and Georgia fans are tearing this goalpost down to the point it's kind of like wobbly like this. You know, it's like it's not straight up like this. It's kind of like this now, leaning forward. Had Tennessee scored, they're still thinking they're in this game with an onside kick. They're going to be trying to kick an extra point where the goal is kind of wobbly. I think it was eventually, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong about this, Tim Wansley, I believe, does that sound right? Gets an interception that kind of sealed the game. And once again, with time on the clock, Georgia fans are running all over the place on this field. It's a really odd scene. It's kind of lost to time because Mark Richt became coach the next year. But it's really unusual to think about just how wild that scenario became, and Georgia fans did tear down the goalpost, and I kind of watched it all happen. Lee Shiver Busman is exactly right about this, that Wansley made a pick, and I believe he got chased down the field. I mean, I'd love to find this on YouTube. We can't play the video on here, but what Lee says is my memory as well, that when Wansley gets the pick, you get this whole swarm of Georgia fans who just run on the field as if it's now legal to go on the field because Wansley's essentially sealed the deal. But there was still time left on the clock. I mean, this kind of stuff would never happen now, and this was only like 18 years ago. And Jennifer Caldwell-Sperlin's right when it comes to the field. There was no stopping Georgia fans from getting on the field that night. A lot of other stadiums are a lot easier to get down on the field. You know, you go to like Williams-Brice and Columbia, the gate that keeps the fans out, especially the students, is really low. It's lower than the desk that I'm sitting at right now. It's pretty easy to hop. Georgia, because of the hedges and, I don't know, zealous security, it's a lot harder to get on UGA's field, but that night found a way to do that. And I have to say that was an odd scene. Fonzo says BA was a wild boy back in the day. I was a wild, I don't want to say that. In 2000, I was not very wild. In 2000, I was still kind of a youngster, so I wasn't doing anything too wild. I didn't even go on the field, I don't think. Janet Walker says, yes, it was Tim Wansley. It was a great game for the fans. Chimman Dog says BA led the charge. I was up in the 300 level, so I couldn't get down the field, but I watched it all happen. It was crazy. I was also kind of nervous that somehow this win was going to get taken away. Like, I didn't know how many technical or 15-yard penalties you could give for 15, 20,000 fans running on the field before the game was over. So there was a part of me I thought I was a little nervous probably. So I should have probably enjoyed that scenario more than I did. Nonetheless, we're going to get ready to get out of here. But before we do, though, let's put 5 minutes on the clock. Congratulations to all of you who got the trivia questions right. And I thought you guys might enjoy going back down memory lane on that one just for a moment. But we'll put 5 minutes on the clock. As many comments, questions as you want. You can do recruiter-relating stuff like you would ask Jeff, or we can just kind of talk about anything. And I'll also give away a $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. That is all coming up here as a part of Before the Hedges right now. In fact, let's get on the clock and get it going. Teresa Stewart and James Bryan, I think, was saying that somebody got hurt during that. And I guess that's a more serious reason why, for the most part, you don't see this. The one thing that I was really surprised by, and maybe I did go down on the field before it was all said and done, because now all of a sudden this memory's coming back. Have you ever heard the sound of a goalpost when it breaks? It sounds really loud. It's sort of like the sound of a tree when it falls. those goalposts are not playing around when they come down. And a lot of the programs now, I don't know if Georgia even does this, they have collapsible goalposts so that after a big win, it's almost like taking the air out of a float. They just kind of, collapse down to the ground. But these like old school goalposts are made like concrete or something like that. When those things really get broken, when they snap, they are making a very, very loud noise. Charles Kaiser says, how many recruits can we sign for the 2020 class? I won't pretend to be able to tell you the full exact number on that, Charles, but I do know you saying 21? Yeah, so what I was going to say is I know it's a smaller number than you want it to be, just given the current state of the scholarship situation, so a smaller number overall right now. Kyle Norton says, do you think Tommy Bush or Matt Landers will make a push this year? Kyle, the best way to answer that is to tell you what other people have said. Former Georgia receivers, all three, Riley Ridley, McCole Hardman, and Terry Godwin, all three mentioned Matt Landers in a recent piece of DogNation.com with their prediction of who could step up. Landers wasn't the only name they mentioned, but Landers, I believe, was the only one mentioned by all three. Maybe J.J. Holloman was too, but Landers got some love recently from some former Georgia receivers there. Kirby Smart also talked about Landers and Bush a bit yesterday as well. Landers in particular for some of the stuff that he's able to do. So for those of you that hope to see those tall receivers get a chance to shine for Georgia this year, Kirby Smart yesterday gave you a little bit of optimism that maybe that might happen. And for a guy like Landers who's been here for a while, he's a little like Stetson Bennett in that he has almost a kind of a cult-like following among some of the Georgia players. They've seen some of the work that he's done in practice, and they think he deserves a chance. And I know a lot of Georgia fans feel the same way about Bush, because when you see a lot of the receivers who are dominating at the college level right now, at least from a physical standpoint, Tommy Bush looks a lot like those guys. So there's a lot of excitement there for him too. Charles Kaiser says, do we take more than one quarterback for this class? I think at some point in time, Charles, Georgia's going to have to address its quarterback depth and find some guys that want to come here and be a part of that. We saw Alabama sign multiple quarterbacks as recently as a couple signing classes ago when Tua Tagovailoa signed. And this right now, though, I don't know how many quarterbacks you can get to want to come and be the second quarterback in someone's class. I'm not quite so sure. There was some chatter certainly after Carson Beck committed that Georgia wouldn't stop recruiting some of the other quarterbacks we've heard mentioned before and we've talked about in this space, but that to a degree may be a bit of wishful thinking. At some point in time, Georgia's going to have to address even more quarterback depth than it has right now, but we'll wait and see if that's a multiple class, or I should say multiple cornerbacks in the same signing class, a transfer, or something along those lines. That is definitely something that Georgia's going to have to address at some point. Mel Gilbert says, what's the latest on naming the field after Vince Dooley? So there was obviously some talk about that. Some former Letterman pushed that idea. Haven't heard as much about that lately. So I'm not quite sure where that stands for right now. I know that there was even some thought that some politicians might get involved with this. We heard a Savannah area congressman, for instance, speak up on this. There's some presumption that maybe the governor may be behind, or not, I shouldn't say behind it, but in support of seeing this done for Vince Dooley. But as of the last little bit, it's been a little quiet on that. As I've talked to Georgia fans about this, the one thing that I hear a lot more is there is, some enthusiasm from Georgia fans about, hey, maybe Vince Dooley deserves something named after him around Sanford Stadium. There's almost universal support for, why doesn't Herschel Walker have a statue or something to commemorate his time at Georgia? I think when you dig deep with this with Georgia fans, and I've tried to do that, I think one of the things that you see is, boy, there is a lot of energy around why hasn't more been done to honor Herschel Walker? And I think that's a fair question to be asked. Let me get a few YouTube comments here as well. As far as Mike D, talking about what we're going to be doing for G-Day, yeah, we're looking forward to being around there and doing a lot of stuff. Hopefully we'll be able to talk a whole lot more about that coming up pretty soon. Mondes, I hope I pronounced it, Mondiesel12 on YouTube says, BA, which 2020 recruit do you think can be the leader of the 2020 class for UGA, committed or not? I think that's a really good question. When you hear a couple of the guys that we heard talk today, boy, there's a real polish to the way that Ari Gilbert speaks, Myles Murphy speaks. They're going to be leaders for somebody's class. I'd love that to be UGA. My hope, though, here is eventually this gravitates toward what you see in 2017 when Jake Fromm was a real Pied Piper type leader for the 2017 class. I know he's not at Georgia anymore, but Justin Fields was able to do a lot of that for the 2018 class. You'd love the idea that at one point Carson Beck develops kind of gravitas on the recruiting trail where he can also have those coattails that a lot of folks want to ride with him on the way to Georgia. I think that'd be a really good thing to see. As far as our $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card goes, let's go ahead and give that to Mel, who asked a really interesting question about Vince Dooley a moment ago. Mel, congratulations to you. Mel Gilbert will make you our winner of our $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. We appreciate you and everybody else watching for Before the Hedges here today. I know you guys love seeing and hearing Jeff Sintel in this program. Have no fear. Jeff will be back next week as a part of what we do here on Before the Hedges. I know you'll look forward to catching up with that then. As far as I'm concerned, though, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. as Dog Nation Daily returns on the Dog Nation video channels and on the podcast channels and on the radio and everything else. Between now and then, hope you have a great day. And don't forget to check out more recruiting coverage and plenty more about the Dogs going through spring practice right now at DogNation.com. I'll see you at 10 tomorrow morning for Dog Nation Daily. Have a great day, everybody.